So what guitar would I recommend for a kid? So what I would recommend depends on the kid, their interest, how old they are, how big they are, how their hands are. But if they're really little, I wouldn't even recommend a guitar. I would actually recommend a ukulele. Kind of like a mini guitar, kind of. The strings are a little different when it comes to, like, this is higher pitch, then it gets low, and then a little higher. But the thing is, like, the layout is the same. You have frets, you have strings, the principles are the same. Just, little different hand shapes. Some people would say, well, what about a 4-string electric guitar or something like that, a 4-string guitar for kids? I've seen them, no experience with them, so probably not as much material out for them when it comes to, like, playing songs and stuff. So it might be good, but personally, I would probably go with ukulele. And then once they get a little bigger, they can move on to a guitar. Now, what about when they are a little bigger? When they are a little bigger, maybe like 8 years old or so, I would recommend a classical guitar. The strings are kind of similar to the ukulele, where they're more like a plastic nylon, and they're softer on the touch with the fingers, so their fingertips aren't going to hurt as much. Easier to play. They can start with 1-string songs, stuff like that. The only downside is, like, the frets are bigger and the neck is a little bigger than, like, the average guitar. But, stretching's good. The other nice thing about these is the fact that they come in multiple sizes. You can get a half size, a 3/4 size, a full size like this one. I personally wouldn't go below a half size. That's a little too small, but at least I feel that way. And as they get a little older, they move up to the 3/4 size and then the full size. Or they could move on to, if they're doing really well, move on to steel string guitar, anything like that. I wouldn't necessarily recommend an electric just because they're heavy. It might be a little easier to play than a steel string acoustic, and it's maybe a little easier than a classical depending on the strings themselves, but they're still metal strings that I think they're going to complain a bit. Oh, my fingers hurt, I don't enjoy this. Where these tend to be easier on the fingers, which means less pain. And you always start with just like easy 1-string songs, stuff like that, because if they're more interested, they're going to play more. And the last nice thing I'll say about these is they're self-sufficient, that you can just pick it up and play. Electric, you got to plug it in, make sure there's electricity. You can't just throw it in the car because you're, do I have my cable? My amplifiers are going to be electricity where I'm going, and am I going to bother anybody? Where with these, throw them in the case, throw them in the car, you're good to go. And if you have any other follow-up questions about them, or if you have any other questions regarding guitar, feel free to comment. Get out there, have some fun practicing.